Hello, my name is Heidi Harold. I'm a public services librarian at Hamilton East Public Library. I am here with Tammy Dunroe Inman, the author of Wintersweet. Thank you, Tammy, for sharing some of your time here with us today and the patrons of Hamilton East Public Library.
Thank you for having me, Heidi.
Thanks. So what inspired you to write this cookbook?
This cookbook was very much inspired by my love of the seasons. I think that winter is maybe one of the more overlooked seasons when it comes to food. And so while I love all the seasons, somewhat equally, I think fall maybe is my favorite, but there was an opportunity to create a book that had all those sort of warm, comforting flavors of the wintertime and kind of give some ideas that maybe people wouldn't think of.
Great, wonderful. And I kind of associate desserts with winter and
yes, cozy comfort foods, warm spices, molasses, chocolate, nuts, dried fruits. Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yes.
There are several persimmon recipes in the cookbook. Persimmons grow in parts of Indiana and I love them. How did you start baking with persimmons?
So I did not know much about persimmons growing up. I don't know if they grow in Massachusetts where I live. I think they do grow in Connecticut and maybe in the western part. I'm not sure, but I found out about them because there was this wonderful produce market we had nearby. It's gone now, called Russo's, and they would just have every produce under the rainbow. And persimmons always just looked especially beautiful. That orange color, it was just so inviting, and they looked like a crazy tomato, and I was very curious. So, I bought some one day, and I did not know, as probably all of your members of the library know, that you have to wait until they're quite ripe. Mine were the Asian varieties. I think it was the Hachia variety. And, I didn't know, so I just grabbed it and I took a big chomp out of it. And I was like, oh my God, what is this thing? Why do people like this? Of course, I did my research and found out, you have to let them get quite ripe. And then I found that they were wonderful. I actually have not ever tried the native variety that you probably have in Indiana, which will be the next step for me in my persimmon journey.
Great, wonderful. Well, that's so interesting. I've had the Asian variety as well, and they are delicious.
How do they compare? Are they similar?
I think so. Yeah. What is your favorite fruit recipe in Wintersweet?
Oh my goodness. I have many favorite fruit recipes in Wintersweet. Probably my favorite, one of my favorite cakes is the cranberry tort. I love it because I love cranberries, being, living in Massachusetts, and also the tort itself really just lends itself to any fruit. So you can make that tort and put rhubarb in it in the spring. You can put, plums and cinnamon in the summer or fall. So that's one of my favorites. I love the baked caramel apples are delicious, filled with caramel and pecans. The poached pears are delicious with red wine and mascarpone cheese. And oh my goodness, apple pie, always apple pie.
Yeah. One I thought looked really good was the prune cake. That seems so unusual, but I really want to try making that one.
That is delicious. That was an old family recipe that got passed down, and it's a Southern recipe. It's delicious. I put a panucci frosting on it, which is really quite sweet. That sort of ties it to the North, I guess, where panucci fudge is very common. So you can have it plain, or you could have it with frosting. If
Definitely with frosting. Okay, I have baked several items from your cookbooks, and like you said, the recipes are very comforting and warm, perfect for a winter cookbook. I love that some of the recipes include winter vegetables. Why did you decide to include vegetables in some of your desserts?
Yeah, I spent a number of years really trying to eat very locally and close to home. So I joined farm shares, CSA farm shares, community supported agriculture, in the summer. when, you know, produce is abundant, but also in the winter, which was kind of a new experience for me. And so I would get these boxes of like all these root storage vegetables, parsnips and beets and, you know, carrots and all kinds of winter squash. And so, you know, I just got very good at trying to find uses for these things. And it turns out, you know, that they're great in dessert. You know, we make carrot cake all the time and love it. And parsnips can be used the same way, and beets can be used the same way. We make pumpkin pie and everybody loves it. And squash is just a great stand-in for that. And in some cases, it can be even better. So yeah, that was sort of how I got into it. I mean, if it's delicious, why not?
Yeah, adds a little nutrients. So
Exactly. And I did have kids at that time, so sometimes you had to use a little trickery.
So my next question you kind of answered in this one was, where do you get your produce?
Yeah, I try to get it these days. I mean, I joined a CSA for maybe 10 years. And then after that, I started going to farm stands and my farmer's market and really trying to like grow my own stuff, which has had mixed results. But I have a little roof garden and, you know, some blueberries and even a little fig tree planted in my yard. But mostly I think I'm feeding the wildlife that lives around my house.
Yeah, we actually have a seed library at our library here, and I have a garden that I've started with a lot of the seeds. I'm growing spaghetti squash, not butternut squash, but and some
Yes,
pumpkins and some different things.
that's amazing. I wish we had that at our library.
Yeah, you should suggest it.
Yes,
They're welcome to contact us. We'd be glad to share any information.
would love that.
Great. Why do you like making desserts over other types of dishes?
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually cook more than I bake. Because having a family, having young kids, teenage boys, eat a lot. But I've always had a sweet tooth, you know, and I grew up in a very sort of health conscious family growing up in my early childhood, that everything was sugar free. And I think sometimes you swing the other direction when you grow up like that. So I've
Yeah.
always loved sweets. But I would say my savory cooking, which I do more of in terms of hours, has influenced my baking a lot because it's made me realize that you can actually make substitutions in baking, and there are like windows of amounts that you can, if you sort of stay within, you don't have to be exactly this. If you stay within this range, you'll be okay. Because I've made a lot of mistakes and a lot of horrible desserts in my life.
I've had a lot of bad experiments myself. So.
Yes, and that's how you learn. You always remember those experiments.
Yeah. I love cheese, and your recipes that include cheese look delicious. Which one is your favorite?
I really love cheesecake. So probably the almond cheesecake is my favorite, or even the orange ricotta cheesecake. And I really love like a nice tart fruit compote over it, like something with cranberries. I think I have a port and cranberry compote. And then there was like maybe a dried cherry compote, something with a little tartness just to cut through the sweetness and richness of the cheesecake. I just love that.
That sounds wonderful. One of my coworkers is not able to eat gluten. She recommended this cookbook to me and said that there are gluten-free recipes, many recipes that can be easily adapted to gluten-free. So I am making the gluten-free recipe spicy Mexican chocolate cake in a video I'm making for the blog. How would you recommend our patrons adapt some of your other recipes gluten-free?
Yeah, right. So like you said, there are a lot of recipes in the book that that don't have any flour at all. And I did that because my mom has celiac disease and I wanted her to be able to enjoy some recipes. But definitely the ones that do call for regular flour, you can substitute gluten-free flour in equal measure for most of those recipes. So that would be like a King Arthur flour, gluten-free flour, or Bob's Red Mill, or Cup for Cup would all work well.
Right.
And I was going to say something else about that. Oh, the pie crusts might be one of the only things that might be a little tricky with the gluten-free dough. But on the other hand, you won't have to worry about gluten formation, which is something you don't want in pie dough because there isn't any. So I would say if you
Yeah.
have trouble rolling out a pie dough that's gluten-free, you could just press it in. Like if it falls apart, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
And there's also a ton of resources online to find ways of handling pie dough. I think a lot of them involve adding xanthan gum, but I haven't tried that. I think King Arthur flour has a good recipe for gluten-free pie dough that was highly rated.
Okay. So thank you. Can you tell us about your new cookbook?
Oh, absolutely. My new cookbook is called New England Desserts. Oh, actually, this is what it looks like on the cover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's basically a love letter to New England, where I have spent most of my life. It's organized by season. So every season has its own recipes. So lots of, strawberries and rhubarb in the spring, and in the summer, lots of blueberries and peaches and, all kinds of berries, black raspberries. And the fall's got apples and Concord grapes and pears. And then the winter will seem very similar and comforting, lots of dried fruits, pumpkin, squash, carrots and parsnips. But it doesn't actually overlap too much with Wintersweet. I tried to keep the recipes different. But yeah, it's got some classic New England recipes like whoopie pies, and Maine has a special potato candy that they make. Vermont has a special ice cream that they make called maple creamies. And just a lot of local fruit desserts. So it's got some history, but it's also like not just for New Englanders. It really applies to really anybody, but especially if you live in like the northern part of the country and Canada, where you see the seasons and you just love eating seasonally.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for telling us about that.
Sure.
Well, thank you again for joining me today. I'm excited to share this with the Hamilton East Public Library patrons.
Well, it's my pleasure.